Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at the Rolex Oyster Perpetual GMT-Master II reference 16710. In a lot of ways, this watch, 40mm in stainless steel, represents a superb solution for those who are interested in getting into Rolex or buying a first GMT, but don't want to deal with the vagaries and risks of the vintage market or the handling restrictions of a vintage watch, but they also don't want to deal with the potential wait lists and MSRP purchase premium of buying a new Rolex. So this P-Series GMT-Master II, constructed in 2001, represents a relatively recent model that is nevertheless finer, more elegant, and a little bit more spare than the current Super Case 6-digit reference. And you can see the difference on my wrist. This wears as a more elegant, versatile, in a lot of ways, a more vintage style piece than the bulky Super Case. Now in 2005 the GMT-Master II was redesigned and it gained that oversized carapace, and the bottom line is that it has larger lugs, a more prominent crown guard, it has a heavier heft and a bigger footprint on the wrist. Although still 40mm, it doesn't wear as 40, whereas this GMT-Master II 16710 wears like a classical 40mm Rolex. And you can see on the wrist it sits nice and low, close coupled to the skin, only protruding about 10mm up. This is good to go whether you want to wear it with a pilot suit or a business suit. It's versatile in that sense, and because it's got that classical Rolex cushion case, it's got enough of a broad stance that there are no hot spots, there are no pressure points on the wrist, and the traditional Rolex 3-link Oyster bracelet is a real highlight here. Now I want to mention P-Series, it does have the solid end links, so you don't get that traditional Rolex rattle that you might be familiar with on an older true vintage piece, but you do get the hollow center links so that it's lighter, less oppressively heavy on the wrist than the current full solid bracelet. It's also a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more supple on the skin, and that's to its ergonomic advantage. You can see my wrist is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, so the traditional 5-digit reference case is really a better fit for me. If you do have a smaller wrist, if your wrist is anywhere below 6 1/2 inches in circumference, and especially if it's below 6 inches in circumference, you really want to consider one of these traditional GMT Masters as a great option in Rolex. Now, the traditional Rolex clamshell clasp, present and accounted for, still crisp, still closes with a satisfying snick, still secure. So in a lot of ways, you're getting a watch that is modern but wears vintage, and with vintage style, flair, and refinement. Again, the pared down lugs, the spare crown guard, the traditional smaller gap between the width of the lugs and the width of the bracelet, unlike the somewhat ungainly gap, the disparity you see on the newer cases. This watch is just that much more comely, in my opinion. And it's also contemporary. Now, all of the modern refinements that you expect in Rolex as a luxury watch are present on the GMT-Master II 5-digit, starting with the dial featuring polished applied white gold indices with superluminova and corresponding superluminova inset white gold hands. Now, older models are going to have printed dials, they're going to be matte rather than glossy. This is going way back to the early 80s and beyond. But the bottom line is, if you want a usable everyday timepiece and not a true vintage piece, you want luminova, you want the high quality of Rolex's applied and self-smelted white gold indices and hands, because they don't tarnish, they don't degrade like the older steel hands on a vintage reference, and the luminova itself doesn't patina and lose its glow as tritium will. Well, tritium patina is beautiful, and it's great for those who are specifically seeking a vintage watch for that quality. The bottom line is, as tritium patinas, sometimes it'll crumble, sometimes it'll come loose, and invariably, after 20 years, it loses almost all of its luminescence. If you buy a modern watch like this P-Series GMT-Master II, you're going to get that dusk till dawn glow from luminova, which charges up using ambient light during the day. Again, practicality is key. And because you're going to have the white gold hands and indices, you don't have to worry about corrosion. So this is a long-lasting timepiece for today and tomorrow. Now, likewise, as a ground-bound armchair aviator's watch rather than a pilot's reference in the modern era, the modern GMT-Master II offers many bezel options, and really since the debut of the 16710, there were three primary bezel options, of which this full black monotone 24-hour bidirectional bezel represents by far the most versatile, and that's because it visually extends the dial. The dial is that gloss black, and from even an arm's length, the bezel reads as a continuation of the dial, such that although the watch is 40 millimeters, when you include the surface area of the black dial and the black bezel, it reads as one imposing large black disc with a silver halo of polished metal around its circumference, and that gives the watch the impression of being a far larger timepiece than its nominal 40 millimeters, allowing you to kind of get the best of both worlds. Big watch presence, but with the traditional proportions of a 5-digit Rolex Oyster case. Now, when I talk about the watch being contemporary, it's important to note that before the late 70s, the Rolex GMT-Master II was always a 50-meter watch. After that, starting with transitional references in the early 80s, you had the 100-meter rating. And this watch is both water-tested and proven hermetically sealed, but you get 100 meters of water resistance, that's 330 feet. So although a pilot's watch, if you do want to jump in the pool, if you're going water skiing, if you're living the active lifestyle, as they say, wherever you want to get wet this summer vacation, this GMT-Master II 5-digit is good to go. And that's the convenience and the practicality of a modern watch. I would not take any vintage watch anywhere near water, even if it is a diver. But this is not a true vintage piece. You get that modern quality and integrity as part of the package. And inside the case, it's just as appealing. Behind the screwed-on case back on the Oyster case, Rolex houses its manufacturer in-house caliber 3185. Now, every GMT Master II is a true dual-time watch. The original 1954 GMT Master was a pilot's watch developed in conjunction with Pan Am, and while you could turn the 24-hour bezel in either direction to read the local airport time off the GMT hand, the bottom line is that that original GMT hand was coupled to the 12-hour hour hand. So the GMT really acted as a AM/PM indicator for the local 12-hour. Since the debut of the GMT Master II reference in the 80s, you've had the ability to set the 24-hour hand separately so you can have two different time zones indicated on the same dial, and because you can still offset from Greenwich Mean Time using the bidirectional bezel, you get the ability to read up to 3 time zones simultaneously if you choose. And let's face it, unless you're diving and it's a matter of life and death, you can use the bezel in the same fashion as you would on a dive watch to basically read intervals from 0 to 60 minutes, using it as a sort of makeshift chronograph if you want to time something of short duration like time in between meetings. Although it's not officially designed for that purpose, I'm not going to tell. And the bottom line is, all of the other features beyond the dual time within this Rolex movement speak to its quality and its precision. A COSC-rated Swiss chronometer, it's been timed in 6 positions at multiple temperatures over 15 days. The chronometer standard means the watch won't deviate more than -4 or +6 seconds per day. And because it is tested in multi-positions, if you do put it crown up or crown down or dial up on your dresser at night, it's not going to significantly affect the rate and accuracy of the watch. Rolex uses a full dual-anchored balance bridge on the caliber 3185, so it has that built-in shock attenuation feature to isolate the balance wheel from the slings and arrows of daily life on the wrist, as I like to say. But it's also blessed with a free-sprung balance, so you have further shock resistance to protect the isochronism and precision of the movement, as well as a handmade Breguet overcoil hairspring, as with all the Rolex free-sprung escapements. So there's a lot of Rolex savoir-faire and original in-house craftsmanship within this movement. With a 48-hour power reserve, automatic winding, and a jump date, this really could be your only timepiece. With the classical black and white metal color scheme, very versatile. And as I opened, I mentioned that this watch is a great solution for someone who wants to get into Rolex with a watch that wears vintage but has all the comforts, conveniences, and practicality as well as durability of a modern Rolex timepiece. And this Rolex Oyster Perpetual GMT-Master II reference 16710 really is the watch you want if that fits the bill for you. Check it out on our website, Watch You Want. I'm confident that 40 millimeters in stainless steel, pre-super case, yet with all the contemporary refinements you could ever want, this GMT Master II is sure to please.